Clerk.
Whereas the Holy Spirit of Council, all those who are serving in positions of authority and responsibility.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, I'd like to take number 9. Yes, I'm sorry. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Alter?
Here.
Ms. Alves? Here. Mrs. Nato? Here. Mr. Zalinski?
Present.
Mr. Boucher?
Here. Madam Clerk, I'd like to take item number 9, the second-hand dealer's licenses first, and then after we'll take visit number 11C afterwards. And a second, please.
Second the motion.
Okay, we need to take this.
Christine. Christine Keener for the license.
Okay. May we have Christine Keene, please?
All I'm looking to do is, Christine King, 28 King Street, Smithfield. I'd like to move Crazy Daisy from Brigidos's Plaza to 706 St. Paul Street, right across from the fire station. Nothing's going to change, it's going to be run the same, it's just going to be a smaller store.
Okay, is this any issue with zoning? No? Everything's on it?
Mr. President, we have the signature of the building inspector, Robert, but I also serves as the zoning official, and I believe it is zone commercial over there, so it shouldn't be a problem. That being said, Mr. President, if I may, make the motion to approve second-hand dealer's license for Crazy Daisy under the scheme.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
The other end was it Mr. Dolce?
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the Town Council. You have before you the abatements recommended by me for approval. Yeah, and I'd also like to add that all the adjustments before you have been reviewed by me. In many cases, this property involved, appointment with the homeowner, met with them, and reviewed, totally reviewed the property. In addition, these adjustments have gone before the board of review for their review and approval. And now then before being presented to the council.
Mr. President, oh, wait.
Good.
Bob, I'm looking at the first page here, the 19 line items. 9 were built to wrong addresses. Do we have a systemic problem here? Oh, excuse me, wrong accounts, I said address. 9 layouts, and we've got 9 of them are built to the wrong account. I know you're new, I know you're trying to straighten this all out, but,
Yeah, well, and that specifically, I'm aware of those. That was a situation where a property was, there was a subdivision,
yeah,
and the subdivision plan, I believe wasn't thoroughly reviewed. A few of the lots got switched. It wasn't a matter of lots being missed, it was a matter of lots being assessed to the wrong owners. So we had to switch that back around and make it correct, which we did. And I believe it's correct now. But, really just a matter of reviewing those and, to a level where you're confident that you have the right owners on the right properties.
okay, thank you.
Any more questions for Mr. Dolce?
Mr. Dolce, this 199, 990, is that the total abatement so far that have been approved? Is that what that total is?
Yes, yeah, and that sheet is the summary of for this fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, Mr. President. Administrator Hamilton, you've reviewed all this yourself, and you find it to be in good order?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Is there any more questions? You accept the package as approved?
Mr. President, under new business, which we moved up, new business 11C,
Yes.
discussion by council, vote or other action on abatements, Mr. Dolce. Because of the administrator's review of Mr. Dolce's review, I'll move for passage of the abatements in the amount of $22,685.12.
You have a second on the motion? Second by Councilor House. Roll call, please.
Mr. Alter?
Yes.
Ms. Alves?
Yes.
Ms. Nagle?
Yes.
Mr. Zelinski?
Yes.
Mr. Boucher?
Yes.
Thank you.
Item number 4 is the amendment to the Smithfield zoning ordinance map.
Attorney Bransky is here to represent the client.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Eric Bransky. I'm an attorney on behalf of the petitioner and the property owner, the Cheryl E. Branch Overland Trust. This is an application for a change of designation on your zoning map to my client's property located on Farm Street. The existing zoning designation as it stands today is RA. We are here requesting a change to MU1. The reason for the change is to make it consistent with your comprehensive plan. As you are all well aware, the comprehensive plan was amended in 2007. Currently, the comprehensive plan future land use map, as well as sections D 3.4.3 and D 24 subsection 58, specifically call for this piece of property and others around it, which I'm not here to discuss, to be changed from their existing zoning designation RA to MU1. Eventually, you folks are going to have to do an overhaul to your zoning map amendment to make all of these changes designated in the comprehensive plan consistent on your zoning map. But the property owner, such as my client, has the ability to kind of take one more thing off your plate and ask for that designation to be changed in advance, and that's what we're here to do. We vetted this through the town planner, went to the planning board. The planning board has confirmed consistency with the comprehensive plan. They've also made a recommendation short of that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you folks may have of us. The client is also in the audience this evening, and I know Mr. Erickson was so gracious to introduce me.
Questions for Mr. Bransky, this came before the Smithfield Planning Board. What date was that meeting?
I can get the date for you, it's in December.
December?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Erickson, do you recall when the meeting was?
It's in your packet.
Yeah, where in my packet, Mr. Erickson?
I mean,
See if I can pull up the agenda here for you, Mr. Kaminsky.
Mr. Erickson, could you point out to me, please? Do you mind?
Yes.
I appreciate it.
You have about 13 pages,
Yeah.
and it is 1, 2, 3, 4. It's highlighted in yellow, and the meeting was November 20th, 2014.
Hang on, take you please. Yeah, you have the electronic one.
It was an email from me to the...
Yeah, can I tell you, Mr. Erickson, I do not have it in my packet. I'm pretty thorough in my packet, so I don't know if it was included. Does any other member have it in their packet?
It's in your big, Bransky's. It's in that.
Yeah, I can't find it. So it was December, so the point was it was for the planning board, December what, Mr. Erickson?
November 20th.
November 20th. I thought Mr. Bransky
I
said
did say
December.
December, I was mistaken.
November 20th is the
My
day.
memory didn't serve me very well on that.
That's
Thank you.
okay, mine doesn't either. Okay, so planning board found this consistent, Mr. Erickson,
Yes.
and they looked at the land use, they looked at deed, general land development.
Yes, and you have the 2 maps from the
I do,
comp plan.
I do. Did they look at other elements of the comprehensive plan, do you recall?
You mean some other area that might be of a broader concept?
One would be the section G of the comprehensive plan. Soils and agricultural uses, did the board discuss that at all?
No, when you have a map, the D1 future land use map, although it's only called land use, it's the official future land use map
Yep.
as far as the state is concerned. That is the controlling part. If it says that should be, and I wasn't here when that was done, you were on the town council when that was approved.
2007, yeah.
Yes.
I recall that.
Um,
But my question basically was, did the planning board look at the other elements of the comprehensive plan in reviewing?
No,
this?
because the map would be overruling. If it says that should be mixed use, then that's the controlling feature.
The reason I broached this subject under G, it does call for the state of Rhode Island to acquire agricultural farmlands, especially particular soils that are located out in that area. I just wanted to make it on the record, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, one other question, Mr. Bransky.
Yes, sir.
I'm very appreciative that your client wants to take this off our list of zones to change. Hopefully the director of planning can get on that and work on those zone changes. What is the use? I mean, you're asking for a zone change. What would be the purpose officially? Why would you want the zone change to MU1?
Well, basically because as it currently stands right now, it is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. If my client were to take a loan on that property, banks now these days are kind of looking at zoning and planning ordinances, bylaws, things of that nature a little bit more closely, and given some of the history in the state with regard to, fighting over comprehensive plan versus zoning in the recent years, it's something banks are looking at, so it's kind of something that just came on my client's radar and said, well, you know what, we might as well do it. It needs to be done, and he's not a gentleman, either is his wife that likes to wait very long, so I'm here before you.
So basically some housekeeping on the property that they are currently have zone RA, they're wishing to zone to MU1, but there's no, has your client here, may I direct a question to your client?
Sure, he's here.
Hi, Mr. Branshaw, how are you?
Very well, how are you?
Good. Mr. Branchard, you want to change it from RA to MU1, which the comprehensive plan supports. Is there a particular business that you want to bring in there? Because mixed use has a number of uses, and I wanted to know ahead of time.
No, there is not.
At this point, you have none?
We have no idea what we're going to do.
Okay.
I'm just getting at an age where I'm thinking about selling and wanted to make this consistent somehow.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Mr. Bransky? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm here on behalf of several association members who
Excuse me, ma'am.
face that piece of
Ma'am, you have
property.
to go to the microphone, please. State your name, please, as well, for the record.
My name is Mary Silva. I live at 1 Primacy Hill here in North Smithfield, of course. I'm here on behalf of several members of our association who are quite concerned with this. We just received this in the mail several days ago. Because we're hearing we don't know what the purpose is, that leads us to believe that anything can go there. We face this property currently. I've lived in North Smithfield for 14 years. I hate to have to leave North Smithfield because I don't know what's coming, as are my neighbors. And so when I hear I don't know what's coming, that concerns me.
Mr. Renfro?
Mike Rapko, 25 Old Greenville Road. Usually when you change a zone, there's an intent, and I guess that's what the abutter is mentioning, is that you have a plan that there's going to be something going on the property, whether it's a cell tower, or whether it's an extension of the soccer association across the street, but you don't usually just change it to change it. I mean, it's usually you're moving in a certain direction. And if you move in that direction, the next step is to change the value of the property. Once you change from rural to MU1, there should be a significant increase in the value of the property once you make the zone change, because you're increasing the value. And the other thing that's happening is right next door, you have the old green property, which I don't know if there's all kinds of easements and other issues that maybe the town planner can talk about that abuts this property. What is the connection of that road and the green property, even though it's on these 10-year comprehensive plan? I mean, you're right next to a conservation area, so that's another issue you have to consider. But maybe the town planner can talk about what's the connection between the green property next door, and do you usually change the zone without knowing the intent of changing the zone?
Mr. President, I don't mean to interrupt, I just want to make sure for the record, technically the public hearing is open.
Yes.
Because it's time to take public comment.
Right.
I know we announced it, but I guess it should be just acknowledged that it's open as of that reading.
Thank you,
Just wanna
Mr.
make sure.
Solicitor. Is there any comments or?
Just go back, is it Silva, S-A, how do you spell your last name?
SILVA.
Okay, goes back to Ms. Silva's one of the public comment.
Is there anybody from the audience want to comment on anything else?
Are we going to answer his questions? Is anybody going to answer his questions?
Yes, yeah, good point. Wait a minute, who's going to ask, I'm sorry.
My name is Ellen Puccetti, and I live on Woonsocket Hill Road. I'm here tonight to represent Northern Green Holdings, and that is the property right adjacent to the property that we're talking about. And the development rights are sold on that property. So that basically means that no development can be done there. Agriculture is very, very important to us, and that's probably why we went ahead and purchased that property as we did. Hearing this concerns me a little bit because I don't think that I would be able to change the zoning on that property because of that. So when we talk about the comprehensive plan, is there something in the comprehensive plan that talks about agriculture and keeping open space in this town? To me, that seems to be a real important issue too. So I just wanted to make a note of that.
There was a question, no, sir, I'm answering Mr. Ramco's question. No.
Okay, sorry. Excuse me, Mr. Bransky.
Yes.
The question that Mr. Rabko brought forward, can you answer that on his behalf?
I can take a shot at it. I believe the question was what was the intent of the zone change? Was that Mr. Ramco's question?
Yeah, the question is, normally when you change a zone, there's an intent that you're going to put something on that property. You just don't change it for the sake of changing it. I mean,
Yes.
normally you have a plan that you're going to move forward with a development, you go to planning, the council looks at it and says, yes, we agree with planning, go ahead, we'll change the zone. But in this case, it's an opening, what are you going to put on the property once you change the zone? And I guess that's what the abutter is asking. Once you open the door to a zone change, then the property owner can do whatever they want. You took the first step, you changed the zone, what's going to happen next? That's one question. The other question is, you have adjacent and a abutter that's got conservation land, which is open space agricultural, that's in the same area, which is in the comprehensive plan. So, I mean, how do you treat, agricultural land right next to land that's now going to be business? Is there consistency in the plan that if you have agricultural land next to it, you should have residential land, or you don't care? It doesn't matter whether you have business next to agriculture, next to an easement that you have on that green property next door. So I don't know if the town planner can explain it in the comprehensive plan that you have all these mixed uses in that same area. And also about changing the zone, what is the policy that the town follows when you change a zone?
Mr. Anderson?
First of all, it's not unusual to change a zone without a specific plan. A lot of times you do it for estate reasons, for raising the value of the land without a specific project. I would doubt that Mr. Pendergast is actually going to develop the site. The same thing is true with subdivisions. Subdivisions are often, they seek approval with no intention of building, only to change or raise the value of the land and ultimately sell it to another purchaser. The comprehensive plan is not necessarily something I would have agreed on any given point. It was done before I came here. When I came here, the state required that all zone changes be completed within 18 months. I came here 24 months later, and nothing had been done, zero, which put us in a very difficult legal bind. The only way we could escape having to change all those or treat them as if they had been changed was to not seek state approval. Fortunately, state had not approved it. And so we waited it out until such time as the state changed the law on the 18 months. And now the town can set its own timetable for converting these. We were in a very, very difficult legal bind when I came here. Now, that being said, the map is still the map. And you cannot change to any other zone unless you follow the process of comprehensive plan recommended zone change first. So you can approve this, you can approve it with restrictions, as this town council has often done, or you can reject it. And whichever way you go, there's a next step in the process to change the comprehensive plan if you reject it. Now, should you have MU1 next to conservation land? There's no reason why you can't. In fact, the agricultural land will often have more of an impact on residential land than vice versa. This is intended to be mixed use, which is a higher density form of residential and commercial. Let me explain that we determined that MU1 was a proper successor for this mixed-use commercial/office. There are two options. You have to have mixed use, meaning one from residential and one from commercial or manufacturing. We already have a mixed use for commercial manufacturing, which is MU2. MU1 is a combination of residential and commercial. So when the highest use, the mixed use stated is commercial office, then it has to be MU1. I recognize that there are agricultural uses on two sides of that property. There is 146 on the other side, which will have a very significant impact on residential uses. So the idea here is to process it on the terms that you were given. And if you have concerns that you think require restrictions, you should make those restrictions. And in general, you have a public hearing so that those requests for restrictions come out in public hearing. So if you have ideas, you need to get them on record in the public hearing, because any changes from the advertisement have to come from the public hearing. They have to emanate from the public hearing. Okay? You just can't make them up afterwards. So those are the rules of the game. I know many of you are new and weren't necessarily aware of that, but feel free to make suggestions about restrictions on the zoning change.
Question, Mr. Erickson. Mr. Erickson, mixed use, does that require certain infrastructure such as sewer and water? Is that a requirement to have a mixed use?
They have sewer and water across the street.
The sewer, I'm trying to see the sewer line in my mind. So it goes right down through there? Does it go to Percy Hill? How far is the extent of that sewer line? I didn't see it in any of it. But it is required, correct? Or yes?
Well, if I could address a couple of issues.
Well, hang on, I just want that answer first.
It
Mr.
is-
Erickson, is water and sewer infrastructure required for mixed use?
I don't believe so, but the density is such that you couldn't do it any other way.
Okay, and is there a water sewer line that goes as far as this proposed zone change?
1,000 feet away.
1,000 feet
Yeah.
up, okay.
Yes.
So it's not there, thank you.
I'd like to address a couple of issues that came up tonight. You are charged tonight with considering change of the zone, not considering development of the property. Your zoning ordinance, which has also been amended, as well as your subdivision regulations, or the planning board subdivision regulations, if you will, have also been amended since the time that your comprehensive plan went into place. Any future development on that piece of property would, of course, have to comply with all of the zoning regulations concerning mixed use. Would have to comply with all of the zoning regulations concerning mixed-use residential, and would have to comply with the subdivision regulations regarding the same. That is the planning board's and/or zoning boards, depending on the type of relief you are seeking, responsibility. This change this evening is to make something that is inconsistent with your comprehensive plan consistent with your comprehensive plan. And if I could read you a couple of portions of state law that I know I cited in our memorandum to the planning board. First is from the Comprehensive Planning Land Use Act. This is at Rhode Island General Laws, section 4522.2-13, subsection C. The very first sentence is, each municipality shall amend its zoning ordinance and map to conform to the comprehensive plan in accordance with the implementation program as required by subdivision 4522.2-6B11 and paragraph 4522.2-6B12.4. That's from the Comprehensive Planning and Land Use Act. Now, when you go to the Zoning Enabling Act at 452434, says a city or town, and this is subsection B, the city or town shall bring the zoning ordinance or amendment into conformance with its comprehensive plan as approved by the chief of the Division of Planning of the Department of Administration or the Superior Court. Section 452450, which is also the Zoning Enabling Act, power of the council to adopt consistency with the comprehensive plan. It says, the city, or this is subsection D, the city or town must bring the zoning ordinance or amendment into conformance with its comprehensive plan as approved by the chief of the Division of Planning of the Department of Administration, etc. Basically the same language from the last statute I read from. Your comprehensive plan, future land use map, says this is mixed use 1. It's been that way since 2007. Subsection 58 of D, land use of the comprehensive plan, designates this specific property as RA to mixed use office commercial, which is MU1, and states the reasons why the council did that, as well as all these other properties which are designated for change in your comprehensive plan. And then subsection D 3.4.3 of your comprehensive plan narrative, as I'll call it, cites this site as mixed-use office commercial to take advantage of North Smithfield's access to Route 146. A mixed-use office commercial district should be established to provide opportunities to develop campus-style executive office complexes. 3 sites are identified, 2 on North Smithfield Industrial Highway, Pound Hill Road, and 1 on Quaker Highway, Central Street. These sites are suitable for the development of corporate offices, offices with light manufacturing and or research and development, healthcare facilities, banking, restaurants, daycare facilities, and or other uses that may be considered amenities to the main employment use. So I have to emphasize, your comprehensive plan implementation says this has to be done, and it has to be done this way, and that's the way you folks adopted it. It's also why you adopted your zoning ordinance governing mixed-use commercial to answer concerns, and good concerns, that Mr. Swolinski said before about water and sewer and those type of things, if and when you develop the property. So, as far as intent, etc., I think you don't have to go any further than the comprehensive plan itself. I hope I wasn't too verbose and I explained everything, but hopefully that answered the question.
Question for Mr. President. Solicitor DeLeosi, if I heard correctly, Planner Erickson said that there was no time frame on changing these zones. He came in after that expired, and now, in essence, does this town council have to pass this zone change?
Under state law, the town council, don't forget, go back a step. Town council had public hearings on the amendments to the comprehensive plan, and those public hearings led to approval of what has been referred to as land use plan that's attached to the comprehensive plan, changing this location to an MU1 zone. So this isn't something that's a cop before the horse, it's something that's already been vetted at a council meeting. Under the state law, you're supposed to then change your plan, your zone to comply. You're required to. The statutes cited by council are correct. Now, if the council, the only way the council, if they really, and I'm not suggesting you should do this, you'd have to give a good reason and revisit those changes, but technically, the comprehensive plan has been amended and you've already said that this is what your chosen zone would be, and the next step was to change the zone. It's unlike a case where somebody, if this was not consistent with your comprehensive plan, then that's when the typical planning department goes first, the planning board makes a decision with a recommendation to the council with a zone change and an amendment. That's a little different. That's not what this case is at all. Theoretically, this could have just as easily been a hearing where Mr. Erickson is here with the half a dozen or other, the plan amendments. Theoretically, that's how this would have normally been done, would have been the town's own initiative, would have been changing all of these at once.
Yeah, I think the problem is, and you can testify to this, that we have not taken the initiative to correct these zoning changes. If you recall, Anchor Subaru, it came, you represented them admirably, and they had. That was an existing highway use that wanted to expand, the comprehensive plan called for. And we had a plan telling us what they wished to attain. This is totally different. You know, I heard Mr. Erickson say that nothing's changed. Yeah, Mr. Erickson, not for me, it would have to come through your boss, but I would imagine that a lot of time has been wasted in not addressing all these zoning changes. It's one thing to say, I came after it, but you've been here for a few years.
No, that's not the case at all.
No?
And I want to make it clear on what the time frame is. It was when I came here, 18 months by state law.
Mhm.
So if somebody wanted to call the town to change plan zoning to actual zoning, we would have had to concede that. The only way we escaped is by deliberately not trying to get state approval after it had been rejected. Otherwise, we would have been in a real mess. Because there are zoning changes in there. The planning board has looked at virtually all of them. And there's some in there that had no business being in any conceivable comprehensive plan, where you're making ups, or where you're down zoning land that have already been developed, would give you no advantage except to put those people in pre-existing non-conforming status. So they would have to go back to the zoning board of review for every addition that they wanted to put on their building. It made no sense whatsoever. So the great bulk of this is not something you would want to put in the next comprehensive plan. The planning board picked the ones that were most likely. We came before the town council, your town council, and half of them were rejected, and I think rightly so. So it's really not appropriate to say that we haven't tried to do the zoning changes, because we did. And I can tell you, I will gladly sit down with you and go over everything that was done by your town council that was totally inappropriate to the needs of the town.
I think we might have a workshop on that. I think it would be to be initiative and take some proactive movement on this. Now, you said you came before us to tell, which council was that you came before us to tell us that some of these zoning or proposed changes were not consistent with pre-existings?
That was at the planning board level.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We came before you with specific changes to BH. Half of them were rejected. We had another one
When you say BH, are you referring to what?
to BH zones.
Yeah.
For example, Bridget O's Plaza.
Yeah.
I think we all understood at the end that that should have been MU1, not BH. Okay? When we did it on Quaker Highway, it was very clear that people wanted to stay residential, not BH. Okay? So the planning board, at its own level, made decisions about what they should push forward with. And, you know, I'd be glad to have a workshop on that, once we get our planning board.
Thank you, Mr. Everson. I think we're just getting off the content of the topic. Thank you.
If I can make just one more note on the time frame, because it's an important distinction. The 18-month time frame that was then amended in state law to basically be not 18 months, that pertains to you folks taking the initiative and amending your zoning ordinance, what we call sua sponte, or on your own. That does not pertain to an applicant that actively petitions this board to change the zoning from one to the other. I just wanted to make that distinction, so I'm happy to answer all of your questions.
Could I ask you to clarify one thing? I think I heard you say that there were two properties, I'm sorry, there were two properties on the industrial highway that were suitable to be reclassified to MU1. Did you say the truth? Yep. What's the second one?
It would be in the future land use map. Let me see if I can. It says North Smithfield Industrial Highway, Pound Hill Road, and one on Quaker Highway, Central Street. It just says two on North Smithfield. You'd have to look at the map to see what the other one is.
Ron, do you know what the other one
I
is?
think we need to stick with the matter pending.
No, because if I may interrupt you, Solicitor, if I may, Mr. President. Once a zone change gets, it happens, every other person, developer will come and say, what's consistent with existing zone or uses over there? So I think Mr. Clifford has a poignant point, because if the zone gets changed, let's identify the property as well. And has that property been purchased for agricultural soils and development? We don't know this yet. This is pretty important, I think, what Mr. Clifford was getting at.
I believe the other one, if my recollection serves me correctly, was across Pound Hill Road. I could be wrong on that. I think it was across, or North Smithfield Industrial Drive, whatever it is at that point.
Is there any safeguards we could place, or restrictions we could place on this property? As far as the butters and the like, or is that another question, Mr. Solicitor?
Yes, you can put any restrictions, conditions that you want, but I'm not so sure that there's been any placed on the record at this point in time. But obviously, they can be generated by the council if you were satisfied.
So I'm just concerned about, development and buffer zones and the like.
Mr. Chairman, not to be disrespectful, for the record, that's what your zoning ordinance is for. We would certainly be amenable to any restrictions that are compliant with the zoning ordinance. We're not amenable to any other restrictions. That's the whole purpose of the zoning ordinance.
I understand, but I'm also concerned about the people who are going to, because at the present time, there is no defined development, just a change. Now, the question is, down the road, when there is development, how is that going to impact those people in their areas?
Goes through the planning board process, has public hearings like any other development, 2 to 3 stages of approval, public hearings, and zoning relief if necessary, same as any other development.
I just have these concerns in the back of my mind. It's for, I hate to see people get impacted by development without some sort of buffer zones and all like. But I do thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I move in the interest of helping our tax assessor get back at a decent hour tonight, that we table 11A1, tax stabilization for senior citizens, until the next session. Before anyone? Before any more time elapses. I should have made this motion earlier. 11A1.
Yeah, is that a motion? I'll second that, so in case anybody was here for that, Mr. President. It's a motion and a second.
That's 11B.
11A.
It's in the new business.
New business.
11.
And we table it so that Mr. Dolce can get home at a decent hour. It's got to go to Jamestown.
Thank you.
But I made this motion now rather than later. I should have made it earlier. And my apologies to Mr. Dolce that I didn't do it earlier.
Take a vote.
Okay. So we table this.
To the next session.
Also make regularly scheduled council meeting.
Yes.
Motion, second. Roll call.
Mr. Alter?
Yes.
Ms. Alves? Yes. Mrs. Nato?
Yes.
Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Mr. Booker?
Yes.
Back to the issue. Can I ask a question? Someone spoke earlier, Mr. President. Ellen, I believe it was you. Are you still there? Ellen, you own the parcel on Plat 8, lots 36 and 30. It's Northern Green Holdings, correct?
Yes.
Roughly how many acres is that, do you know?
I believe it's about 85 acres.
And you sold to the state of Rhode Island the development rights to keep that as farmland, is that right?
Yes.
So that's in perpetuity.
We'll have to explain that term.
Well, that's forever, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's going to weigh in on my deliberation. Thank you.
So is there any more discussion concerning this, councilors?
Mr. President, I have a question.
Mr. Raffer, you brought up a point earlier about revaluation of the property. If it goes from rural agricultural to mixed use, which way does that go? Up?
Yeah, I mean, if you go from residential to commercial, you have a mixed MU1 where you can do apartment houses or whatever you're gonna put, small business. It's
Just the zoning doesn't change that.
No, but I mean, once you change the zone, I would hope the tax assessor would go in there and reappraise the property because you just changed the zone.
He's still here.
Yes, Mr. Dolce, before you leave, a question? It's the same question that I posed to Mr. Rapco, and I posed it to him because he was actually the one who brought it up. Changing the zoning wouldn't change the tax assessment until something is done on the property, correct?
No, well, with vacant land, generally they would look at the zoning on a vacant parcel. When they do reevaluations, you'll have a mix of residential properties on commercial land. If they're being used residentially, then they're most likely valued residentially. If they're commercial properties on residential land, vice versa, they're valued by their current use, if improvements exist on the parcel. If they're vacant, they generally look at the zoning use.
But that would increase the land value for taxation
Well,
purposes?
It could increase the land value. It depends on the location. I mean, real estate is location, 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 so.
I was a real estate appraiser. I held a license in the state of Rhode Island. And I've been sitting here looking at the Google Earth map of the location. And looks agricultural to me. So that's just my opinion. Thank you very much. This is what we're talking about.
Motion to approve this at this time? I'm sorry, we have to close.
Any other input?
Is there any other, would you like to speak on this issue, Mr. Rapco?
Very quickly. Mike Rapco, 25 Old Greenville Road. If we have all these issues with the comprehensive plan, aren't we starting a new comprehensive plan very shortly? I mean, if we're gonna have to fix everything, why shouldn't it be done in an orderly fashion instead of trying to fix individual properties that don't agree with the last one from 8 years ago? I mean, why don't we just do it right and just say the next comprehensive plan has to fix this property along with all the other properties that are all messed up? Why don't we just do it in an orderly fashion and not create issues with the council? Ask this, what is the recommendation of the solicitor? Is there any damage by waiting until we start the next comprehensive plan and fix these issues?
Mr. Solicitor?
Well, I think the problem in this particular case is this council has already acted after a public hearing, after the planning board had a public hearing, and amended your comprehensive plan to include this change. This is really the culmination of that act that has already been done. It's not the cart before the horse, it's really completing the transaction that the planning board did. It just happens that this particular council wasn't here at that time. But this is really just completing that process. It's really completing that process. It just so happens that an applicant is asking us for it instead of the town planner. That's the only distinction. So that the planner is sitting here with 6 requests saying these need to be correct, consistent with the comprehensive plan amendments that you made and the planning board made after public hearings, after amendments, after approval by statewide planning. It just happens to be one applicant asking for one provision. So I don't think this is out of order, or I think it is completely in line with what the work is. All these amendments take time to get through the system and ultimately change the zone. Nothing happens that quickly. As they said, that this happened back in some time ago, right?
Yes, I guess 2007.
Question for the solicitor. So, sir, are we bound to approve a particular zone request at any time? This town council or any town council?
No, but obviously you opened yourself to the fact that you basically had said that you would do this to the statewide planning. I mean, I'm not trying to, I mean, you had said that. You submitted a plan to statewide planning that was approved by your planning department, your planning board, and your town council, although some of you weren't here at that time. And they,
I was.
and they get stamped by statewide planning. And you said, this is what we want to do.
Should change. Does it say shall or must change?
Shall, the statute says shall.
Okay.
Statute says
Somewhere
shall.
I read the comp plan should change.
No, that's not the comp plan. This is your zone. Your zoning
Zoning comes
change,
from the comp plan.
right, shall change to be compliant with your comp plan. You're right. Shall change to be compliant. And that's, you just happen to be at that point in this time with one particular applicant, and I understand the discomfort, but there's been a lot, I haven't a participant, I can tell you the process was at least 2 prior public hearings, with at least the prior approval of the planning board, the council, and statewide planning. He said, this is gonna be our plan.
I agree with you. The comp plan was stated these particulars, not just here, throughout the town, should be changed. They have not been changed. So it's before this council to either approve this zone change or not approve this zone change. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, there is, and I want the board to consider this any sort of overt promise or something on our end in terms of action, but there is an appeal. So it's a very limited appeal. If the council were to say no to a zone change, the only thing the Superior Court would look at for a petitioner is, was the request consistent with the comprehensive plan or not? That is the only consideration for the Superior Court. So another thing that's been brought to my attention, and I didn't even think of this may actually help you folks, is, as I understand, you have a local ordinance that requires 2 readings for every ordinance. So it may make sense to call this a first reading, let you folks talk to your solicitor, do a little bit more homework, read some of the statutes on this, talk to whoever it is you need to talk to, and then come back in the second reading and make a decision. I'm not so sure that that applies to a request for a zone change under state law, but if that will make you feel more comfortable, we'd certainly be okay with it.
Mr. President, is your client amenable to that? Are you speaking for Mr. Branchard?
I am.
Okay.
I would just suggest if the council is gonna do that, continue the public hearing to another date so that we can continue to have dialogue with the public, and so we don't foreclose that opportunity. So if that's your thought, continue the public hearing to a date certain so that the public can continue to participate. Otherwise, you're gonna be closing it on them. I don't think that's what the council wants to do.
No. If I can make I'm comfortable with what I've just heard in the past couple of minutes. If I may make a motion, Mr. President, I'd like to continue this meeting to the second, this public hearing to the second meeting in February, which will give everybody enough time to research what they have to research. So I'm making a motion to continue the public hearing.
What date is that?
What is the second meeting?
16?
February. That's my
February
motion.
17, 2015.
That's my motion, Mr. President.
Second.
Councilwoman Nina? Clerk, roll call.
Mr. Arthur?
Yes.
Ms. Alves? Yes. Mrs. Nato?
Yes.
Mr. Valenti?
Yes.
Mr. Shin?
Thank you for your time. We'll see you in February.
Next item on the agenda is discussion by town council voting on an action on the audit report year ended June 30th by Connolly Corey Associates LLP.
They haven't arrived yet.
Aye.
They haven't arrived yet. Ready to continue on to the next item.
Item number 6, discussion by council vote or other action on request for tax exemption Brookside Equestrian Center solar project. Authorization for signature.
Good evening, Mr. President, council members. Alan Shore from the firm of Abatements in Providence, here on behalf of the Brookside project. I have Ian Palmer, the CEO of New Equity Investors, and Ryan Black from the project construction company, Solbright Renewable, here with me as well in case there are any questions or any information we can provide. We're here to secure authorizations from the council pursuant to your town ordinance under the stabilization of taxes for solar powered systems, chapter 6-3.12. We're seeking the council's authorization to allow the town administrator and the solicitor to reach a contract with the project developers for the stabilization of the taxes so that this project can be constructed. And we're seeking the tax agreement for the value of the equipment that is being used for the solar energy project, not the real estate. So it's not a real estate or real property tax request. It's related to the equipment, the value of that equipment. We don't own the property. Our project is leasing land at the Brookside equestrian farm. So we are adding value to the town. We're adding value to the region by way of the equipment that's being brought in. So that's the request for the tax agreement is for the value of that equipment. And it's, as you can see from your stabilization ordinance, you have taken the step of exempting the property of the cost or value of solar powered system primarily utilized to produce energy for sale beyond the property. But we need that contract with the town in order to put that into effect. I can give you some background if it would help about the project. This is one of, I think you hear about these solar energy projects. It's about the lowest impact energy project you can get. It's not an intrusive structure. It's not a wind turbine that's going to have visibility issues. It's low to the ground. It's on private property. It's set back. There's no impacts, really. It's a very passive project. There's no infrastructure required from the town. No sewers, no roads, no additional services that are required from the town. It's passive as far as the town is concerned. But yet at the same time, it provides significant local benefits to the town, to the region, tax revenues for the town, stabilization of energy prices. We've just gotten a 20% increase in electric rates recently. This is all part of an effort to try to help stabilize the energy prices and the disruptions caused by fluctuating fossil fuel costs. This is a project that would bring jobs to the community. Jobs are important. These are high-end, as well as laborer jobs associated with the construction of the project itself. Those people who will be coming here will be purchasing services and goods from the town while they're constructing that project. So there are local benefits that come out of it in that way. So that's the kind of the overview, very high level overview. Glad to answer detailed questions if you have any. And I'll take a breath and see if you have any questions, or if I can introduce any of the other gentlemen that are here with me to get into the specifics.
I would like to, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion to open this item up for public discussion.
And the council has questions.
Oh.
Yeah. We ask questions first.
Okay.
If we have any, right?
What's the timeframe for this project to, if we were to start from start to finish, what was the timeframe to take for this to come to fruition?
You mean for the construction of the project?
Yes.
Once we get it going on the actual construction from beginning to end?
Yes.
Mr. President, so in terms of time frame, that's a good question. Ryan or Ian?
90 days.
90 days, yeah, it's 3 months is about what it would take to build, actually construct the project itself. Once the actual equipment is on site, it moves along very, very quickly. The panels themselves are, they kind of move along very quickly. There's not a lot of, there's not like heavy construction or excavation work, in other words, that would be required. So they move along pretty quickly.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Shaw, welcome. You weren't here the last many of the numerous times before. Was 2 other times this came before town council?
No, this is my first time.
First time, okay. You
Before
mentioned
the-
jobs, Mr. Shaw. In a previous discussion with council and residents of the town of Lincoln Farm, the question of jobs came up, and I'm going to ask you, if they're going to be permanent jobs, and if so, how many? And not the temporary 90-day construction jobs. What, is this going to add some type of on-site workers?
That's a good question. No, the jobs are in the construction phase.
Yeah.
Although, as I understand, these guys can correct me if I move astray. But my experience is that the jobs are associated with the construction of the project. Once the project is constructed, as I mentioned, it's a pretty passive operation. Once it's integrated with the utility systems, it's not as if there are, full-time jobs associated with the day-to-day running of the operation. So no, I don't believe there are full-time jobs that are associated on a day-to-day basis. I don't believe there'll be people living or moving into the town in order to operate the project. It's run remotely.
Pretty much the same information that was given the last time. Mr. Shore, are you familiar with the packet that we received this for our meeting? There is a memo from New England Equity. Maybe Mr. Palmer could answer this question. Mr. President, if I may, to Mr. Palmer.
Sure.
November 12th, we had it revised with new language. Mr. Palmer, do you have that memo in front of you?
We're pulling it up now, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, just the presentation material that we had from,
Well, yeah, it's actually a memo that you had signed.
the actual letter. I don't think I have it in this package, but I recall it.
You can have mine if you want to read it.
Oh, no, I think we have the letter.
Okay.
Yeah, the letter
From November 12th.
Basically,
Go ahead.
it's kind of a two-phased question here. November 12th, it's revised. You're asking that the town enter into contractual agreement to exempt 70% of the real estate property value of the project.
Right.
I don't think I posed this question at that time. When you say 70% of the entire horse farm or 70% of the location of the solar panels?
Only the solar panel improvements to the property.
Okay, and roughly, what's the square footage on that? Or acre?
Well, the actual, to be clear, the land underneath the solar project would still have its normal tax.
Oh, okay.
So what we're actually only asking for is reduction in tax in the improvements, the equipment that goes onto that part of the land.
Well, I guess I didn't understand.
And
It
that's-
says town to
yeah,
exempt 70% of the real estate property value of the
Yeah,
project.
but that we should correct that. That's a great, I made that point earlier. Yeah, I think it's confusing when you talk about property taxes, automatic assumption, it's land, it's real estate. But this request is related to the equipment values.
Because it does follow through on your next January 5th with a verbiage very similar. But, may I continue?
Yep.
Thank you. So it follows through on the January 5th letter. Now, at this point, the contractual agreement that's being asked is for 60% of the property tax. So basically, it went from $10,662 per year in actual value of property tax yield, and now it's at $13,600. So the difference between that, I just want to make sure that all these numbers are correct. So from 70% to 60%, there seems to be an increase of $2,000 to the town tax revenue. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So for my edification, I want to make sure I'm understanding this. No real estate property taxes are being asked to be reduced. Just the property of the equipment, the tangibles?
That's right. And I think
It's not spelled out yet. That's
the planner just introduced he instituted the concept that for the town's purposes, as he's explained it to us, the town taxes the equipment at the same value that it taxes real estate.
So it's treated as real property for setting the rate. I've talked this over with Dave Gold, and that's where the confusion lies, because they're actually asking for a real property decrease when it would normally be tangibles in another jurisdiction.
Can I refer back to that memo also of November 12th, where it mentioned you'd be selling electricity to Holliston Sand? Is that still going to be what you plan on doing?
Yes, Counselor, that is still the plan. There's a contract in place with Holliston for the sale of the electricity to that company, to that local sand company.
And still no agreement with the landowners?
No,
to receive-
there's an agreement with the utility, and as I understand it, the agreement would provide that a percentage of the distribution of that electricity would flow back to the Brookside Equestrian Farm business to help offset some of the lighting and some of the heating and some of the other needs of the farm. I'll leave the technical questions to the
But that's not till 15 years later, right?
No, I believe that will go into effect as soon as the switch is turned on, so when the power is conducted.
That's not how it was last time.
If I can kind of follow up on Councilor Al's question.
Can I just finish one second?
Sorry.
In this letter, it said that the homeowner will not receive anything until after 15 years of the project, but now you're saying they will receive something when the project starts?
So, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, we're going to give a little clarification because I think we've had so many different discussions and everything kind of merges together after a while. For the first 15 years, we have a contract with National Grid. They're the ones actually paying us for the electricity that's provided in the grid. And the purpose of putting solar projects where they are away from coal plants and gas plants is to help stabilize the infrastructure and to bring the electricity generation closer to the users of the electricity. So this electricity is paid for by National Grid, just like we're a power plant, but it stays local. More than half of that electricity will be used at the Brookside Equestrian Center. The rest of it won't even make it to the end of the road. I mean, it gets used, the electrons get used locally, essentially. After 15 years that we have the agreement with National Grid to do it that way, we also have a takeover contract from there forward with Holliston Sand for them not even to go into the grid and move around locally, but to go right into their operation and to sell it to them at a discount. So I know that, through a succession of different meetings and people talking about it, I think it has become more confusing than it really is, and I hope that helps clarify it. Does that help answer the question? From your perspective, and if not, I can certainly add more explanation. Something?
Can I follow up on you want to go first?
Well, he sort of answered it because it does go into the grid.
It does.
After the 15 years, how would the Equestrian Center take a 1.25 megawatt system? And what do they need to do in order to take that energy directly from the solar field? That still has to go through National Grid into the grid.
So these systems can be, I call it plumbed, or, plumbed behind the meter, which is right into the operations of Holliston, for example, which is right behind the meter, basically going right into their panels, or it can be outside the meter. So for the first 15 years, this is outside the meter, it's going into the utility. The energy stays very locally though, but it's going first into the grid and then back into people's meters. After 15 years, we'll rewire it, essentially, to go behind the meter of Holliston Sand and have it go right into their operations. So there will be a little infrastructure change on our part to make that work.
And what happens with any overage, if there is any? Does that get sold back to National Grid?
If there are overages, it would spill back out their meter. But the way that we do that is we always make sure that a behind-the-meter project is less than the total consumption of that commercial entity. So, you really want to, especially in this state, avoid overages because National Grid doesn't guarantee to pay for it. Some states handle that quite differently, where there's a reversing of the meter that generates credits, but not in Rhode Island with this kind of a project. So if that helps. Yeah.
If I may, Mr. President. Mr. Palmer, if you could just stay there for a second.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm getting used to being up here.
How do we bullet point this?
Yeah.
So there's 1.25, what is it, kilowatts, megawatts?
Megawatts, 1.2.
Lot of electricity.
Yeah.
So did I hear you correctly that for the first 15 years, is the horse farm going to be able to tap any of that electricity during the first 15 years?
Yeah, so when we look at that amount of production,
It's a lot.
it's a lot, versus somebody's consumption, we know that roughly they consume about half of that kind of volume.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite a bit.
So for the first 15 years, is the equestrian farm going to be tapping into that generated electricity?
Yes, they are.
Okay. And after that, I don't know if I'm going to be on 15 years. I get 2 more years up to go. I don't mean council years. I mean life years.
You got one?
I hope so. So 15 years from now, the equestrian farm would still, if still in operation, would still have the ability to take that electricity or decide to sell it back to into the grid system.
That's correct.
Okay. But you've already had an agreement with the sand and gravel operation to give them, what was it, 40%?
Yeah, we're going to give them, correct. So we wanted to have something in place for that 15-year point, an assurity of somebody buying all the electricity. And National Grid doesn't guarantee that for us after 15 years, so we sought out a additional contract with Holliston Sand. And they were good enough to say that made sense, and the enticement to them is a discount on what they would pay for electricity, which in New England is becoming attractive, obviously.
Okay. Mr. Shaw, earlier you had stated that this is not like a wind turbine. Everybody sees that. Those things can be quite high. You have to get FAA clearance depending on that. They're intrusive, I would have to say that. You said it wouldn't be seen, but we had a previous council member that was serving with us up till December. He said he would actually see it from his house over on Black Plain Road. So I don't know if it's you that's going to be able to answer this question, or maybe Mr. Palmer or Mr. Black, is it? Would somebody be able, what is the visual sight of this, these big solar panels? Are they going to be, explain that to me.
Yeah, I mean, these guys know, Brian knows the specifics of the particular panels, since they'll be constructing them. But they're a few feet off the ground. I mean, they sit about 6 feet off the ground. I mean, that's all it is, 6 feet off the ground, and they're just lined up in panels like flat screen TVs might be, lined up, about 6 feet off the ground. So they're very low to the ground. I mean, if there are no trees around at all, it's going to significantly reduce any visual.
And the elevation, see, you have to refresh my memory. Were we provided with a rough draft of the site of the elevation where these panels would be? How high up on the property are they going to be? So if I'm a mile away because of the elevation, are they going to, because that was one of the points that the previous council member made, that they would be seen.
So I can comment on that. The panels themselves stand up with their racking about 5 to 6 feet in this neighborhood. And I've walked the perimeter of where the
project will be located. And I couldn't see anybody's homes up there. It's actually the same elevation as the barn, maybe about 3 to 8 feet higher than the barns. It maybe comes up a little bit.
Okay, I'm kind of familiar, but some.
Yeah, so there's and there are horses there today, but you can't see the homes from there. I think actually part of that discussion was that Councilmember McGee said that he might be walking up in the woods occasionally and would think that he thought, you know, that he could see the panels if you're up in the woods, but that's all private property. So.
Yeah, he was careful not to say he was trespassing.
If you remember that, it was a very careful conversation, but it wasn't really from his home, it was him walking up in the woods. And yeah. May I just make one more clarifying point? The request that's before you tonight is for a 60% relief or 60% property value, equipment value reduction. I think you were here last session for a 70%, which was referenced in Mr. Palmer's November 12th. I just want you to make sure we're clear on that we're not seeking a 70%.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah,
I
we're
actually
seeking.
brought it up to actually quote the dates and whatnot of the letters that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So we're seeking a 60%, which is 20% lower than what was the Next Sun project, which I think was an 80% approval. So we're seeking only 60.
I'm sorry, can you just go over this whole electric thing? Is this totally different than the last proposal? Because the last proposal, the farm wasn't gonna receive any electricity from the last proposal. Is that correct? Other than going into the grid and going into the regular.
Yeah, so in the last time that we talked about this, we were attempting to explain that the energy goes out from the project into the grid.
Right.
And it gets used locally. The electrons get sucked back into whoever's the most significant user closest to the production of the project. And the first user is the Brookside equestrian farm, and they will use at least half of that energy back in. We were trying to get that point across. I don't think it came across properly.
So their electricity is still gonna go through National Grid, they're still gonna be paying National Grid?
Yes.
So they're not gonna be receiving any direct
No.
energy from this farm?
Correct. And one of the things we were trying to explain last time is that's exactly the same contract and the same technology architecture as the Next Sun project. It's identical. It's the same arrangement, it's the same kind of metering system, it's the same law, the same contract with National Grid. And that's where things, because we have two different companies talking about it, and it would create confusion, but it is exactly the same kind of system as what we're talking about. So I think the easiest way to understand it is that all these projects have to go through National Grid. National Grid is the utility company, so they have all the transmission equipment in order to produce that energy to an end user who's going to need it. It's not a project where, in other words, the wires, where it's like, somebody building a little generating project by themselves and then just, plugging it into their own house or their own building. In this case, as in all these solar projects, National Grid, is the electric utility that we all rely on. So all these projects have to plug into the National Grid. Then the National Grid then distributes that energy back to where it's used. And I think that's what Mr. Palmer was trying to explain. So this project is exactly from an interconnection and electric generation way with National Grid. It's identical to the Next Sun project. They're exactly the same arrangements with National Grid. If that helps. So feel free to answer any other questions, but that's our presentation. I know you have a lot of other business on the agenda tonight, so we just ask you, all we're asking really just is your authorization to allow us to work with the town administrator and the solicitor to reach a contract.
I I have one more question. If you look at your National Grid bill, it's broken up almost in half, at least mine is, with the delivery, which is National Grid, because of their wires, their infrastructure, and then your distributor, who you can actually change and choose who you want, that generates your electricity. Could the equestrian farm change to a distributor that does this work in that way?
No.
Do you sell the power to a distributor?
Yeah, well, the power is, in this case, sold to National Grid, and then National Grid will then turn around and sells that to the equestrian center.
Okay.
So the equestrian center is going to get that same bill that you get, and there'll be all those charges associated with it, except in this case, as Mr. Palmer pointed out, that generation part of your bill, in your case, Counselor, you know, your generation might be coming from a natural gas or fossil fuel plant somewhere. Wherever it is, the National Grid has decided to go get that power to serve you. In this case, the Brookside Equestrian Farm will be assured of knowing that National Grid is providing the power from this solar project back to them. So that's how, it may not show up on that bill, because this is, National Grid's a huge company, those bills are kind of mass produced, but that's how the electrons are going to work, as Mr. Palmer described.
My husband installs solar panels.
Oh, really?
Like this, yes.
Oh, cool. He's in that, so he's in the clean energy construction business.
Well, he's a commercial industrial electrician who ends up doing a lot of solar.
Great.
So I asked him a million questions about this.
You're lucky to have somebody so close who can help you with that. It's complicated.
Mr. President, Mr. Shaw, I'm reading the January 5th memo,
Yeah.
and of course I highlight stuff, and maybe I'm missing something here.
Yeah.
But the second page, second paragraph, about 6 lines down, after the purchase, I use the acronym PPA, power purchase agreement is complete. There's agreement to sell the local community. It doesn't mention in here, am I missing this, because I look at so much stuff, am I missing in here where it says that the power will be going directly to the equestrian, some of the power, from the day that solar, if this is approved, if the solar panel is generating electricity, is there somewhere in this memo that says that the Brookside Equestrian will be benefiting from the power?
Yeah, I think it's part of that arrangement where it's distributed to the local, through the local electricity grid.
Yeah.
That's what we meant.
So, but it's going to be backmetered, in essence, if the equestrian farm needs a certain amount of electricity, they're not going to get metered, but you're going to wire it in, I guess this is more to you because you're more technical. Is it going to get wired from the solar panels to the, which I'd be in favor of, by the way, it's a local business, that if you let me work my way, muddle my way through this question, because it is muddled. So if the power is generated there, and some of it is used by the equestrian, I feel much better about this proposal, but I don't see it actually being written that way. The other piece that I have a problem with is the property. We still use the value of the property, the verbiage. Somehow if it said for the tangibles, the equipment, you were looking for a rate. To me, that would make more sense, because I don't see a tax rate being given to the property itself. The land, terra firma.
Right.
Okay.
So 2 answers. One is to word the requests and the motion in that way would be perfectly acceptable to us. And I'll look to town solicitor for that kind of wording. But let me answer the first question as well, and then I'll turn it over to the legal experts. Essentially what we're doing is there are essentially 2 meters at that location. There's a meter that's monitoring the electricity going into the grid. Okay, but sort of, you could call that a wholesale generator. So we're getting a wholesale rate from National Grid, and it's roughly 14 cents. And then there's a retail meter for everybody down the street to pull that electricity back in. The first customer on that street is Brookside, and then so on down the street. And everybody who is on the grid will be receiving those electrons through their meter back into the property, and and it will get used within, within a quarter mile of the generation from our wholesale meter.
But basically, going up Tiff Road, residents there would be pulling the electrons off that and using it, and then the grid would be charging them for it.
Exactly. And the benefit of that is by moving power generation closer to the use, you have more stabilization of the grid. It's not just the clean power and the renewables of it, it's avoiding brownouts, it's avoiding additional infrastructure that have to otherwise get built by National Grid, more substations and more feeder lines and things like that that we all have to look at. It brings that power generation to the use of the electricity. And again, we're amenable to the correct wording of the motion that gets us to the correct end.
The request, yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Mr. President,
Go ahead, Council.
I just wanted to let the council know that in anticipation of this matter, I did look at the prior contract and both the state law and the statute, and I could sense the confusion about the language, about alluding to real estate. I had drafted a motion, obviously for your consideration. Seems to me the only person, and I'll read it to you because it's relatively short, but if you're going to consider this, the contract should be with the owner of the equipment, not with the owner of the property. And it should say that the town is authorized to sign a contract with the, pursuant to your ordinance, which is 6-3.12, which specifically says you only give an exemption of 20 years for solar equipment. So there's no confusion, that's number one. And then I put a few other conditions, that it'd be 60% exemption, assuming that you wanted to give them that. Creating the 13.6. In addition to that, it's very important that we direct the tax assessor to use a straight line depreciation of 30 years. Why? Because this is a depreciating asset. So we want to make sure in year 20, you're still getting a hold harmless of approximately $13,600 or thereabouts. And you're never at a point where they've depreciated the asset to zero and then you're getting no tax at all. So if you use a 30-year straight line depreciation, you're supposed to use a number like $100,000 exempt, $100,000 asset. You depreciate it over 30 years. You know in year 20, it's still going to be valued at 33%. I'm talking about as far as the tax assessor is concerned. That's the last year of the contract. Does that make any sense? As opposed to real estate that has appreciation value, this is a depreciating asset. It's equipment going down, so we got to protect on the depreciation. So I put that in there if you want to consider it. I've also indicated that it would have to be subject to my approval, a contract that provides, and I looked at the previous contract that provided these working parts. At the end of the day, you want to be held harmless that you're essentially getting that $13,600 every year for the next 20 years. That's what you're trying to accomplish. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
As it depreciates down, it's not 60%. First year will be 60% of 100,000, using my example. The next year it'll be a different number because we're using the 30. But it'll always have this hold harmless number. Does that make any sense?
Yes, Solicitor, there's a question by...
If you want to consider it, I would suggest that you consider reading, someone could consider reading this motion. It provides the flexibility to get us to that point.
Just one other thing I wanted to interject. Now, if the landowner is not held responsible for this, I'm not an attorney, I don't even play one sitting up here, but my understanding is when something's attached to the property of the land, it belongs to the property owner, the landowner. So now, are we hearing that this equipment won't be the responsibility of Brookside?
My understanding is they've got a lease, a land lease going for the 25 years.
Is there a bond in place to remove that should, God forbid, New England Equity Limited Liability Corporation, Sole Break Renewable Energy Liability Corporation ceases to exist? Is there going to be a bond in place to dismantle and remove and restore that property to what it was?
I don't know if it's a bond, but there's a security arrangement.
Security bond, yeah.
There's a security arrangement such that there'll be funds available to decommission that facility.
Okay. That would be something I would like to see, just to get a look at, if I'm going to, in deliberating on this. I think I'm done with questions, Mr. President.
Mr. President, quasi follow-up, security measures around it. There's going to be gates, fencing,
Yeah,
some sort of security to make sure that people don't go in and, I don't know, sunbathe on the solar panels.
There are typically fencing and other things that are put around in the event that, it comes up close to where there's potential public interaction. I think this site's pretty set back. I mean, it's a horse farm
Yeah.
that's set up back on private property, and I'll let these guys talk about the actual construction details, but there's usually, security devices, not devices, but fencing that's put in place to prevent, people from walking up and damaging the project. It's really protection of the property.
There's a security fence around the entire building.
So, Mr. Parma, did you provide the previous council with a two-scale map of the project, where the panels would be roughly on the property, the boundaries of the property showing the location, or approximate location of the solar panels and the dimensions, the size? Did you provide that?
No, we have not yet. We certainly can. That's.
I think that's pretty important.
It
Show
takes-
the elevations, the contours over there as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
It takes about 6 acres, roughly.
All right. If you could show the again, you know where I'm looking.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll make sure it gets sent over to you tomorrow. Yeah, absolutely.
And finally, just for the record, we're absolutely fine with the conditions that Solicitor Dolce has outlined as far as the framework for your motion.
Okay, we're going to open up to the public. Make a motion to open up to the public, may I hear a second?
Second.
Mike Clifford, 489 Black Plain Road. I'm just sitting here listening to these numbers, and we don't have papers in front of us like you do, and maybe you have some concrete numbers down there showing you exactly what you're giving away in terms of dollars of tax revenue. But what we're hearing isn't making sense. I think Mr. Rapto was of the same opinion. If this is being taxed as a tangible, okay, tangible depreciates, long-term tangible assets, I believe, depreciate over a 13-year period, and are taxed at the highest tax rate of the town, $42 and change, versus commercial real estate or residential real estate that have much, much lower rates. So if this is being taxed as a tangible, you automatically are giving up 5% depreciation every year for the first 13 years until it goes down to a base. I think the base is like 30% of the total value. So if you're giving them a 60% discount on the assessed value, does anybody up there have any idea how much lost revenue we're going to take a hit on here? Because it sounds like, as we're just doing the math that Mike and I together, it sounds like this could be a substantial dollar amount. And it might be a good idea to get a statement from your tax assessor showing if you didn't give the exemption or this reduction of 60%, what would we be collecting in taxes over the life of this asset versus, giving this exemption. Then what are we going to be collecting? Because I think it sounds like, on the surface, it's going to be an incredibly sizable amount of money between the two. I mean, 60%, if I'm understanding what they're saying correctly, 60% of the assessed value is taken away from them, so they're only going to pay 40% of the value? Their assessed value is going to be 40% of the asset? Can you do that for my home and my car and any other toys that I have around the yard? Because, like I think Mr. Yazbek said last time, there are a lot of businesses that have been in this town for decades and have been paying their full share, and a lot of homeowners too. And I'm sitting here saying, wait a minute, this sounds like an incredible deal. How do we, take a number and get that same little package here? But I think it would be prudent to at least, before you took any action, to get a statement, a fiscal impact statement from your tax assessor showing exactly how much money you're giving away. Because I think it sounds to us like it's quite a bit of money. And I don't know what the assessed value of this asset is with all the equipment. Do they give you that number in your packet? No. So I don't think it's just, nickels and dimes here. I think we're talking some serious money.
That's a great question. If I could maybe just provide a little perspective in reply or response. I think we provided the value of the equipment in the information that Mr. Palmer provided. Remember how many, the values, the cost of the
About
$1.5 million of equipment. And I think that's an important number to remember. These are very, very expensive projects to build. These gentlemen have to come up with $1.5 million to build a project like this. That's a very expensive project. So they have to be very, very careful that a project that's going to require $1.5 million to build is going to be economically viable in the long term. I think the big missing component of the gentleman's question is that he's making an assumption that they're going to build this project in North Smithfield regardless. In other words, that they're going to build this project here as a given, and that if they're going to build this project as a given, you should tax the heck out of it. You should get 100% out of that project. The problem with that assumption is that they can't complete a project of this size of $1.5 million investment they need to come up with if this project is going to be taxed at 100% of the value. They'll go somewhere else. They'll go to other towns in Rhode Island that would be more accommodating to help a project that has that much capital intensiveness get constructed. So they've done the calculation to determine if we're going to build this project here to provide the kind of benefits that they've been talking about, Brookside Equestrian Farm, to Holliston Sand, to the town of North Smithfield, the only way that project can be financed and constructed is if there's a compromise, if there's an agreement with the town to provide some tax stabilization, some forgiveness of the value of the equipment that's involved in this project. So I just want to make that clear, just for the perspective. It's not; they're not going to build here, irregardless. This is a very important component. And I can't emphasize that enough. The amount of taxes that are going to be paid. Put it another way: if they don't build this project in North Smithfield, you get $0 in tax revenue for this project. Zero. So.
Could I ask him a number question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question, Mr. Radical, that was kind of, Mr. Shore or Ian, Mr. Palmer, whomever, we part of the packet, I guess you gave back the PowerPoint presentation. We have it in hard copy, is that correct?
Yeah.
And it was revised November 2014. This comes back to some of the vagueness of your application. Production costs are estimated at $2 million, based on current $17.70 per thousand real estate rate. This is not real estate, so this, you're really going to have to do a fiscal impact on this, because right now it's just getting cloudier and cloudier by the minute. So I just want to leave it at that for now, Mr. President. I appreciate Mr. Radico and Mr. Clifford asking these questions, but it's not real estate. Because it also goes on to this to say that the Brookside Equestrian Center pays, it's been a farm since 1998 in the family, and pays $13,000 in annual taxes to the town. Totally different. The town should still expect to collect whatever the current assessment value is on that farm property if it was $13,000. And then what's before us today is possible tangible taxes, and being asked for us to accept a reduced rate on those tangibles. In their presentation, they keep referring back to real estate taxes of $17.77 per thousand. So you've got to take a look at this and try to get a little tighter.
Mr. President, if I can repeat what I said about half an hour ago, David Dolce taxes this tangible equipment at the real property rate, $17.77, something like that. So the confusion is that we recognize these are tangibles. We recognize that this is equipment. It is being taxed at the real property rate. So as long as you recognize that they are in fact, this is in fact equipment, but it's being taxed at 1777 or whatever, it's perfectly clear. Now, should it be? I don't know. That's the tax assessor's decision. And maybe the budget committee and the tax assessor can talk that over. But that's exactly the way that Nexon was taxed.
Can you just remind me how much revenue you plan on making from National Grid with this 15-year program?
Yeah, there's a price per kilowatt hour that is agreed upon with National Grid. And yeah, I think we included that reference point when we were showing you the similarity of the contract program with National Grid. If you look in the back of the package that we provided, we provided a filing to National Grid, and it showed that the contract with Solbright, which is this project, will pay the project at 14.9 cents for every kilowatt hour that is produced. And I'll let Ian explain what that means in terms of dollar value. Maybe would that be helpful over the contract?
Yeah. Just to generally answer that question, it's about $20,000 per month that the project generates in revenue.
For 15 years.
For 15 years, correct. And we do pay federal and state tax on that income, just like, there's no break on that, so it's tax-bearing revenue from the project. But that was your question.
And again, I think the idea is that revenue over time is to pay back for the $2 million or $1.5 to $2 million investment.
Mr. Bowes?
Valves, 370 North Main Street. So fast forward 15 years, but I think we finally hashed out the first 15. At that point, if I understand it correctly, it's going to go directly to, the higher percentage is going to go directly to Hollis and Senior. Lesser percentage is going to go directly to the equestrian center. So it's not going to go through the grid. It's going to go directly to them. Okay. So what happens either prior to or after that 15 years if the equestrian center says we're selling out? Does this follow to the next landowner? And the same thing goes for Holliston. Is this going to be part and parcel to the deed for the property?
Yeah, I think we'll get that fully off.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a question that's going to go more towards the arrangements that are described in the lease with the landowner in terms of what happens if there's a change in ownership. Ian, is there any more detail on that we can offer?
Yeah, so we have a land lease with Brookside for 15 years with 2 5-year options. And so that can continue out for 25 years. They're at our option. So it can be up to a 25-year land lease. And regardless of what happens to Brookside, the land lease continues with the property. Answer your question? Yeah.
Excuse me, I have a question. If something happened where, let's say, they went into bankruptcy or anything, how would that affect you?
Brookside?
Yeah.
So we have, what do you call it, subordination rights? you know,
First.
first right to remain on the property. And the banks, if there are banks involved and so on, they cannot put a lien on what we have improved the property with, which is our equipment. So that would certainly, the system would continue, and whatever settlement would come out of a bankruptcy, we would remain until in possession of our land lease. It would have to be honored by bankruptcy and by banks.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
correctly
right.
from a legal perspective, I'm not a lawyer, but.
Yeah, that is pretty much all, you know, characterized in the lease documents, that the project would remain exactly as it is, would not be impacted. Now, if Brookside goes out of business, if the equestrian center, say, shuts down, and they stop all operations, well, then they don't need any they would not need, you know, they would not need electricity at that point because there's nothing operating. So at that point, as Mr. Palmer has described, then at that point, the available electricity would flow to the closest user. Now, it may be the next neighbor, or maybe whoever else on that road. So it would all just sort of flow to where, it all goes to where it's needed. It all goes to the load, they call it, wherever the electricity is to be added.
Mr. Rapco?
Mike Rapco, 25 Old Greenville Road, speaking as a private citizen. I don't know if the council had a chance to review Mr. Yazbek's comments in October, and he was pretty adamant about why this should be rejected. It'd be important for you to reread those minutes from October, because I listened to his the story that he was telling, and it is an overwhelming story that you should pay attention to, because there's a lot of important information in there. The issue I have is I don't agree with the solicitor or the tax assessor. When you look at equipment, power generation equipment, National Grid is in a structure of tangibles with a 13-year life, a long term, with a 5% depreciation. The residual value is 30% after those 15 years. I don't see the difference between a solar panel and something that National Grid is putting into their substation. It should be a tangible. It should not be commercial property at $17. It's something, our tangibles by state law are allowed to go into leased land. So there is state law that follows the fact that you have something on someone else's property. And it works very well with the tangible. There's a lot of correlation between putting something on a piece of property and you're leasing that piece of property for your purposes. That's what the tangibles are set up for. So I think we should have a discussion with David about the fact that maybe this should be a tangible and not commercial property. The other thing that's is important is that the logistics, it's not only the economics you should be looking at, it's the logistics. This is a very sensitive area. We've got a lot of problems in that area. If this facility is going to be built, is there going to be access through Tiff Road, or is this going to go through the horse farm? Because right now we have some real serious legal battles going on with the abutters that they're having with Holliston Sand and Gravel related to the status of Tiff Road. So is this power company going to go through Tiff Road, or are they going to go through private property to get to the solar panels? And the location of the solar panels is important also because all the sand and gravel was removed between the house and the barn. There was an exemption that allowed the property owner to remove all that gravel and sell it to Holliston because of the fact that the house could not see the farm animals in the barn. So is this solar project going to be between the house and the barn, or is it going to be beyond the barn? And the question is there going to be more sand and gravel removed, or is this project going to be on level ground with no sand and gravel removal? And that'd be a worst case scenario. You approve a project, and then they're allowed to remove all the sand and gravel, and just send it right over to Holliston next door. So there's some logistics issues that I think you need to address. Where is this facility going to be located? What is the access? Is it going to be through an easement through the horse farm, or is it going to be through Tiff Road? And I think we should also be talking to the abutters, you know, right next to Holliston, which are probably abutters to the horse farm, and maybe those abutters should be speaking up also. So there's a lot of issues, logistics and economics.
Mr. Rapco, thank you. That was the reason I asked for a site plan map to show possible location, topography, existing conditions over there to see where it would be. From that point on, of course, it'd be stamped by a state registered surveyor, and then we would actually see what's transpired over there because it is private property. Then we'd be able to look at that. We can go back to previous topo maps and see how much it's. There's a lot that can be gained from requesting and receiving what I asked for a half an hour ago.
Yeah, I guess the logistics, is there going to be any disturbance to the existing property? Is any sand and gravel going to be removed from that site?
No, there's not going to be any sand and gravel removed from the site. It's a flat site. It's going to remain like that.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, just my only comment in response is great questions. I think we need to just, let's be careful what we're here for. There will be a special permit, zoning planning board process in order to get into the nitty-gritty of the actual, setbacks and designs and all those characteristics. This is exactly what goes on before planning board. All these questions are great questions. We're just here to secure an authorization to get a tax structure put in place. These are land use, all driven questions like that. Those are great questions, and there's a plan. I encourage all those folks to come before the planning board and here. And the other comment was, I think there was the gentleman said that there was somebody on a previous council who had some comments about the project that should be reviewed. My recollection was that councilor voted in favor of the Next Sun project also. Again, it's sort of identical economic structure as what we're talking about. And this is a more favorable request seeking a lower tax relief than the Next Sun project. So I just want to point that out for the record.
Mr. Rapco?
No. I think it's important to read the minutes because I disagree with those comments because Mr. Yazbek was very clear on the difference between the Branch Village project and this project. He was very clear on his comments, and I think it's important that you read the minutes. This was not Mr. Yazbek saying that this was favorable. He had some really clear distinctions between the two projects and how the electricity was going to flow from the projects. And I guess it's important to read those minutes because, I don't have the minutes in front of me. If I did, I could at least, quote what was said. It'd be important for the council to reread those minutes.
Could I ask a question? And I'm going to direct this to you, Mr. Rapco. If what we have before us is an exemption of 60%. 60%, well, 13,660% of X, right, which is 21,760. So what it looks like to me is that they're asking for a simple reduction of $8,160. That's based on the numbers that they give if it's a real estate tax rate. Now, I would need the solicitor to weigh in on if it really is a real estate tax rate or our taxes. I thought our tax assessor already said it.
Well, let me just say that the 2 points you made, as far as the rate is concerned, that's a valid point that's set by the tax assessor. As far as the period of depreciation, by contract in the previous agreement and the one I proposed, is we're going to get away from applying what is normally an accounting depreciation schedule, and by contract, they're going to agree to a straight 30 years, so we're protected during the 20-year period. So we're not going to apply the tangible depreciation schedule. We're not doing that. We're contractually, they're going to agree that it's going to be a 30-year depreciation schedule. So during the period of 20 years, when you are granting, if you're going to grant the exemption, it's straight that you're protected. As opposed to, if you did it 13, then they would get 60% of a large sum up front, and it would be constantly going down. That's not gonna happen with a straight depreciation.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And it's gonna be 30 years. That's the way it was in the last contract. That's why Solicitor Lombardi put it in there, because of his tax background, to make sure that you were protected on the last, all the way to the end of the agreement. As far as the rate is concerned, that's a tax assessor's decision. And I guess you could contractually make them pay a higher rate. But I mean, the bottom line is, why would, if the tax assessor said that this is in fact rate X, why would you manipulate that? That'd be like, I mean, the tax assessor's making some ruling. I think you need his input.
I agree.
Does that make sense?
I'm sorry, Mr. Rocco?
Yeah, I was just going to clarify it. I don't know what it should be treated as, but if the tax assessor should look at other projects, and if it is a tangible, there's $60,000 of taxes due. So if you give them a 60% discount on a tangible, they're getting a $36,000 discount, and then they would pay $24,000. That's if it was a tangible. The question is, should it be a tangible or should it be commercial property? I think a clarification is needed from the tax assessor why he decided to make it commercial. Because if National Grid and other power companies are treated as tangibles, there's all kinds of state laws that follow leasing of property and putting tangibles on leased property and following the schedule of that property. It fits very well as a tangible. I don't understand how it can be treated as commercial property, but that's up to the tax assessor to clarify why he's calling it commercial property.
And ultimately, it's up to this council to decide if this deal will be consummated. Right? If I may, Mr. President, following up on that deal analogy, it's let's make a deal. So, we have before us that they're looking for a 60% exemption. We don't know if it's tangible, property taxes. Mr. Shore, are your clients, because I want to have as much information as possible, are your clients, I'm sure you representing New England Energy Equity, do you represent Brookside Equestrian Center as well?
No, the landowner?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, I'll pose this question to them. To the owners of Brookside Equestrian Center, you're entering into a lease with this potential solar farm. Are you at liberty to tell us what the amount of that lease, how much money you'll be getting over the period of this contract? Because they seem to have very thin margins, and they're asking the town to give them something. And I just want to know if there's going to be like some type of give and take from the landowners.
It's not finalized yet because we're not sure what the structure's going to be. It's not very much, it's about $1,000 a month.
$1,000 a month? Thank you. And that's for roughly 4 acres, 4.5 acres, is that right?
No.
8? How many acres?
6 or 8? No.
Do we know how big?
Yeah, it's about 7 acres. 7 acres.
7, I heard 4, so 7 acres, about 1,000, thank you. President, if I could make a motion to continue with the public input to a date certain. I don't know if we want to have it on the date that we're also looking at that other zoning. We get too many issues on one. These are big issues. So can we move this out to March, the first meeting in March? Because the second meeting in February, we're going to be having the zoning question before us. I'll make that as a motion, so that's a second for discussion. Somebody.
May I, if it's, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I know, time is always a concern. They have an obligation to get this project constructed within a very, short window at National Grid. If that doesn't happen, then, they lose this whole project. So we were hoping to have a resolution of this, before March, so, sort of in the next couple of weeks.
Understand your schedule, if I may speak, Mr. President. You have a 90-day turnaround time from the time the shovel hits the ground. Prior to that, you have to go before the planning board to make sure this is consistent. They would have to review it. It does take time. But in my mind, I'm missing some numbers here. Is it tangible? Is it $17.77? Is it $42 a thousand? I don't know that. So, what could you suggest, Mr. Shaw? Because I certainly don't want to impede the progress, but we're going to make a decision that's going to last for 15, 30 years. This is important. So, a matter of a month or two. Can you tell me that has National Grid given your clients a drop dead date?
Yes, they have.
And what is that date?
Do you know the date? 12-month contract award, which was in late August.
So you had 12 months, so you have until August to have this turned around.
Yeah.
Okay, so
And that means
forgive me, but the time frame itself, if you come before council with the information that's been asked and then fiscal impact, some type of overview of the project, and then go before the town planning board, you certainly should have the 90, more than enough time within that time frame.
Well, this is an important element to complete our financing package with lenders.
Yes.
And that takes time. I mean, the construction is 90 days, but we need to, in the next 30 days to 60 days, secure our financing, work with banks, and this being an open topic is inhibiting our ability to do that. And that is the issue. And, I know there are a lot of mechanics behind how we construct the contract with the town. I think this is uncharted territory for a lot of towns. It's not unique to North Smithfield or Rhode Island. It's across the country. And what we're seeking is the ability to work with the town to craft the right language, to end up with a tax bill that would be in the $13,000 to $14,000 range per year, which is consistent with the economics of the project and will allow us to build the project. How we define it as tangible or commercial property or percentage, we want to leave that to the experts, the assessor and the town solicitor and the administrator and the planner to work with us on. And, we've been up here since early September, and forgive me for sounding impatient, but, it will at that point be 6 months that we've been working on this. I would think for everybody's benefit and the town as well, it'd be nice to move it off the docket, get something going in the town, we can work on the contract language, and start something here to be productive. That's what we're seeking.
Okay, Mr. President, I'm sorry.
I have one question.
Certainly.
If your tax bill is not between 13,000 to 14,000, do you move on?
We're going to have to move on.
North Smithfield?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Mr. President, in an effort to try to accommodate New England Equity and Solbright Renewable, I threw out the date, the first meeting in March because of our schedule, and I may have to direct this to the town clerk. Do we know what's on our agenda for the first meeting in February and the second? We already know that the second we're going to be reviewing and continuing the public hearing on the zone change. Do we know what's penciled in or on each?
Even meeting right now, I just had a couple of things, I can't honestly tell you what they are, but I don't remember, but I think one's a license.
So are we like in February?
So far, yeah.
Okay. Would the second meeting in February help you, gentlemen, as opposed to waiting till March?
Go to the first meeting in February because we already have the zoning.
That's right.
Second.
Okay.
Yeah,
February
if it's that or nothing, yes. I mean, our desire is to.
Councilor Nato just reminded me, so yeah, I would like to withdraw my motion, and I'm going to make another motion.
Second withdrawn.
Okay, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that we hear New England Equity, Limited Liability, Solbright Renewable Energy, and also I would include Brookside Equestrian Center on the first meeting in February. To continue the public hearing.
Second.
What date is that, though?
February 2nd.
Second?
Good, time is good.
Is everyone clear what everyone wants coming back for the second? Are you clear about what you need to provide to the council, and are you clear about what you're anticipating receiving so that when we get to the next one, we can hopefully make a decision. If I can help facilitate anything, I will.
If I may, hopefully Mr. Piat will have this uploaded for anybody to go back and review, but I think that they were taking copious notes over there, what was requested, what was asked of them. You know what, I haven't heard Madam Administrator, what is your opinion on this?
Well, I'm very much in favor of it for a number of reasons, not the least of which is the one that came before you several months ago was identical in all phases. And I think it would behoove us to consider that we've given approval to a very, very similar project. They're up and running, and I think we should consider this one as well.
Was there tax rate on a commercial rate or a tangible rate?
That was on, I believe that was also on the commercial rate. And I'm going to get some clarification myself from the tax assessor. I believe there are certain regulations that he has to abide by in order for him to make a decision. He wouldn't have arbitrarily made a decision to do that. He doesn't arbitrarily make any decisions.
Because I just want to make sure
Right.
projects of this magnitude, there's duration, but also with the level, a level playing field, so to speak.
Right.
You can't treat one way, another one something else, but at the same too is that the question of tangibles is key because you're looking at a vast rate difference.
Right, well, I will get clarification for you tomorrow on why that was done. And I think, to Mr. Palmer's point, it's still kind of virgin territory in a lot of cases for the assessors around the state. The wind turbines being another one, so renewable energy really has a little bit of a different twist. So I will get a clarification on as to why that was, and then should be followed consistently if we have another project that ever comes before us.
Right, I just want to make sure that everybody's treated, fairly, and that, like I said, I understand where Mr. Clifford's coming from and Mr. Radko, and there's, like I said, why is one treated one way or the other, but we have a precedent that was set.
Correct.
And I don't know if that's, Mr. Clifford.
You're addressing what they're going to provide the council next month, but are you going to be provided with an impact statement from the tax assessor showing in black and white how the differences are being made here? Because that's, I think, the most important piece that everybody needs to get a look at. And I think, if you made one bad mistake 3 months ago, that you gave away way more than you should have, that doesn't mean you should make a second mistake tonight or tomorrow night or a month from now.
Well, I don't think that's the case, but I'll definitely get clarification, provide you with impact study. You can make a determination, a comparative analysis of both of those, whether it's tangible or not, and make a decision intelligently that way.
Thank you. Thank you, Town Administrator.
So there was a motion to continue to February 2nd, keeping the public hearing open as well. There was a second.
There was a second. I would like to amend the motion pending topography report, location on property, so a map just to show us where, to answer any questions that any of the other council members had, the tax assessor report just telling us the fiscal impact statement. So if we don't have those things, I don't want to waste anybody's time.
Okay, so the main motion maker, which was me, I will amend it to reflect what Councilor Mayo just said. So you're going to amend in a second. So you're going to. I'm going to withdraw my motion. Do you care to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Okay, so we will continue.
And you seconded it. Withdraw your second.
Sorry. Second withdrawn. And I will make a motion to continue discussion by council, vote, or other action on request for tax exemption for Brookside Equestrian Center Solar Project and the authorization for signature, including a public discussion pending the tax assessor fiscal impact statement, the topography map, and site location for where the solar field will be on the property.
And also put the access roads.
The access, oh, if you want that, the access roads,
Access roads, yes.
To show that.
to show that on the same map. I'm less concerned about that because they're not ever gonna show up there.
Just because of the legal issues.
Right, ingress and egress, absolutely. Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Walter?
Yes.
Sal? Diane?
Yes.
Mr. Zelinski?
Yes.
Yes.
That's it, second.
Thank you for your time.
I'd like to take this at the level D. Discussion by the council, vote or other actions of water bid for gas and diesel fuel by Mr. Pendergast. Diesel fuel? Yes, please.
Again. Good evening, thank you for moving me up, Mr. President. The statewide municipal RFP was put forth by the Rhode Island Municipal Purchase Agent Association for the purchases of unleaded and diesel fuels. This RFP allows for municipalities to choose a vendor based on the price per district that is in the community's best interest. I am recommending to the finance director and the town council that the town of North Smithfield enter into a contract with Santa Buckley and Energy for unleaded gasoline at a rate of plus 0.0409 per gallon, and Superior Plus Energy for diesel fuel at a rate of plus 0.0321 per gallon, as these two vendors per district are the lowest. And that is a one-year contract with two one-year renewable options. We presently have Santa Buckley for both fuels, and they weren't the lowest bid for the unleaded. So I'm going to go to two.
Just got a question to do with the declining gas prices, et cetera, which is taking place over, I want to say the last 30 days.
Reflect this?
Yeah, reflect that.
This price is reflected daily by the oil business. They set the rate daily. So this bid price is reflective of that price. So it's constantly fluctuating.
Oil's in a free fall.
Yeah. So, and then, like I said, this contract is January 1st of 15 to December 31st with the two one-year renewal options.
Thank you. Any questions? Is there a motion to accept this?
Yes, so moved.
Moved by Councilman Zelinski,
Second.
second by Councilman Nato. Roll call please, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Walter?
Yes.
Ms. Alves? Yes. Ms. Nato?
Yes.
Mr. Zelinski?
Yes.
Mr. Boucher?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Pendergast.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 7, discussion by council of order other action on consent agenda. All items listed as section considered one motion. There will be no separate discussion unless the council so requests, in the event which item will be removed from the consent agenda. Pay payment of bills accepted at the town council meetings on October 20th, 2014. See budget, communications from boards and commissions. Yes, et cetera.
Mr. President,
Communications, yes.
early in the evening, we heard past Council President Flaherty discuss his concerns about the minutes of October 20th. I share some of those, what he expressed this evening. So as a current council member, I'd like to table the minutes of October 20th until such time that I certainly, I don't know about, I can't speak for Councilor Rounds, but she was here. Mr. Flaherty certainly will be contacting. There's certain things that we may want to include in there because he was previous council, and I think that that's the way it should be handled. So if we can just continue the minutes to the next meeting. That's
Second.
that's a motion.
Second by Councilwoman Nato. Roll call, please.
Mr. Walter?
Yes.
Ms. Alves? Yes. Mrs. Nato?
Yes.
Mr. Seuss?
Yes.
Yes. So are there items you want to, as far as on the consent agenda, it's the only one we can drop? So, okay, there's a motion.
1 second, please.
I'm sorry.
Payment of bills, Mr. President, I'd like to remove it from the consent agenda and then come back and discuss it.
Motion by Councilman Zawinski.
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Nato. I just want to move down on the consent agenda.
I'll move to accept the remaining items on the consent agenda. Of course, we're excluding the minutes and the payment of bills.
Second.
Motion to seconded. Roll call vote now, please.
Mr. Walter?
Yes.
Ms. Alves? Yes. Mrs. Nato?
Yes.
Mr. Zalinski?
Yes.
Mr. Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. President, so now we're in the portion of discussing what was moved from the consent agenda. Under the payment of bills, the first page, payment of bills, date approved 1/20/2015, today's date. Madam Administrator, is this the new finance director? Could you introduce him?
Would you like a brief introduction?
Yeah.
Little drum roll, please. Yes, as a matter of fact, this gentleman sitting next to me is Mr. Jason Parmalee. Started this morning, still here, good sign.
Congratulations.
Good sign.
My pleasure, ladies and gentlemen.
So he may or may not have all the up-to-date on this, but we'll try to answer your question as best we can.
Okay. So I'll present this, propose, well, let me ask the question to either of you two, the administrator or the finance director. The first item, line number 57281, it's absolute auto glass, it's the replacement of windshield on a 2,000 crown thick. Help me, my insurance has no fault replacement for windshields. Is that, what does the town have for glass replacement?
As far as I know, we have a $2,500 deductible regardless of the trust. So
Okay.
it would not differentiate between kind of the no one.
All right,
Yeah.
so we're keeping track of our deductibles and we're, all right.
Yes, sir.
Question, I guess, Mr. Plum?
Could I just,
Yeah.
I think we have to look into that. I've never seen a policy unless it's strictly stated in that policy. We do have a $2,500 deductible on any claims,
Right.
but on most insurance policies, that's a good question. That is part of it, it's part of the policy itself.
Okay.
So I think maybe we should
Oh,
we should check with the trust, just to double check that.
I appreciate that, because I didn't know what the deal was with the interlocal trust, but I know if I get a chip or something, or it's broken, it gets replaced, no charge.
Exactly.
I could be at the zoo, they'll come and do it for me. It's a commercial,
Okay. But that went through the police department, so I wasn't aware of that one, so we'll have to just check the policy.
Okay, I'm not sure.
All right, yeah, check and click.
Yep.
I'm glad that Mr. Parmalee's here, because on page 9 of 15, Mr. Parmalee, the final billing to your corporate, are you a principal in that corporation?
No.
No, is that, okay. So we have $14,615 final billing. What was our total for the services of Parmalee Emporium?
I think the full agreement was 35 and
All
two
right, so now
installments.
this, we're all done paying, correct?
And this should be the final.
All right, thank you so much. Mr. President, on hearing the explanation and knowing that we're going to look into the replacement, oh, sorry, Council.
On page 1, Avon. I'm sorry, I think it's really funny. Data tapes, $45? What goes on those data tapes?
I believe that's for the clerk's office to record all of the data that they receive through, like, it used to be microfiche, now it's all done through electronically. Is that, am I speaking correctly, Deborah?
I honestly don't know what the tapes are for. They used to have tapes, but I thought it was done through town hall now.
Okay, I'm gonna have to see what the answer to that is.
I don't
Being
know.
that today was my first day,
Yeah,
I didn't see all of these yet.
It's $45, but.
A question I
it
can
tickles me.
have an answer for you, definitely. Yeah, no, I understand.
Please.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me check on this as well for you.
Yes, I know exactly what that is. Actually, that is. I know exactly what it is. But it's a monthly fee for our website, is what that is. But
Anything else?
Mr. President, after hearing the discussion on payment of bills, today's date, 1/20/2015, and under the recommendation of the town administrator, you've reviewed these, Administrator Hamilton, and Mr. Powell, I'm not going to put you on the hot seat, you've only been here one day. So
That's okay, go for it.
Under the recommendation of town administrator, I move for passage of payment, total March payments of $2,222,630.15. That's a motion.
second.
Second by Councilman Nato. Give a roll call vote, please.
I'm not here, Paul.
I'm not here. Mrs. Nato?
Yes.
Mr. Zalinski?
Yes.
Mr. Derbyshire?
Yes. The old business, item number 10. Discussion by council board of action on appointments of board members. Economic Development Committee, Historical Committee, Juvenile Board, Parks and Recs, Redevelopment, and Sewer Commission. If I'm not mistaken, the latter two, we have, those are advertised, 5 and 6.
Yes, I do have one under old business, number 1, Economic Development Commission, one person to fulfill a 5-year term that expires 12/1/19, and that's Ms. Dina Finnegan. I believe information is in your packet. She's been stepping up to the plate, helping out everywhere she can in town. She was very instrumental in working on the bond issues that we had and doing publicity for us. She's a very outspoken young lady. I think she'll be very assertive in trying to help further economic development, so I'd like your approval for that.
Move to approve the administrator's appointment, Mr. President.
Second.
Second, roll call vote, please.
Ms. Alves? Yes. Mrs. Nato?
Yes.
Mr. Zalinski?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Hey, Ray?
I do have another one, Mr. President, if you'd like, for number 3, Juvenile Hearing Board, 3-year term expiring 12/1/17. The Juvenile Hearing Board had interviews last week. They interviewed several people that were interested in the coordinator's position. And their first choice, and also with representation from Mrs. Rapko on the Personnel Board, was Anna Cameron. She was at 143 St. Paul. And I guess it was quite unanimous in the decision, very highly qualified for the position. She's a social worker, she's worked with juveniles and has a thorough knowledge of community and social service programs within the state and the town. So I think she would be an asset to help that. That group does a tremendous amount of work, and I would like them someday to come and tell you exactly how they help kids navigate through the process and avoid being incarcerated or have a record, you know, so there's a lot of intervention that goes on. They do a lot of good work, so I would like to recommend Anna Cameron.
It doesn't require our acknowledgement, it's your appointment, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay, Parks and Recreations?
I do not have anything. Those are the only two I have.
Mr. Historic District.
Madam Administrator, there is an email here from Anthony Solly to you. Did you review it? It's in our packet.
Oh, you know, that is true. Yes,
Do you want it to refresh your memory, or?
that is true, yes. No, I remember now because it was a recent, another person that needed to be appointed because we had a person step down. Yes, so, yes, that would be for the Parks and Recs Commission for 12/1/16. That's determined as 12/1/16.
You'd like to appoint?
Yes, I would.
Okay, I would
Anthony,
second for approval. Excuse me, make the motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call vote?
For Mr. Anthony
Mr.
Solly.
Mr. Walter?
Yes.
Ms. Alves? Yes. Mrs. Nato?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Boucher?
Yes. Do we have anybody, I'm sorry, Madam Administrator, do we have any on the economic development, for economic development, which is the first one on the, at item 10?
That's Dina Finnegan.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought she was,
So Dina Finnegan, Anna Cameron, and Anthony Sullivan.
okay, I'm sorry.
So we're getting closer to filling all the vacancies.
Okay, there's this discussion by council, vote or other action on rules of town council.
Mr. President, would you entertain just continuing that? I got it, and that was an overload, and I looked at it. Would you mind a motion to continue it to the next meeting?
Absolutely. Second by Councilwoman Nato. And we'll continue this on the next meeting.
Thank you. All right, you want to take a vote? Yeah.
Please. Roll call, please.
Mr. Walter?
Yes.
Ms. Alves? Yes. Mrs. Nato?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Boucher?
Yes. Discussion by town council, vote or other action, solicitors engagement agreement, Mrs. Hamilton? I'm sorry, it was all three of the signature. That was in the, I'm sorry. That was under the,
I'm just looking for approval to engage our solicitor and be able to sign on behalf of the town that we engage them and our assistant solicitor as well. We have agreements every time, every 2 years, and I just want to make sure that I have authorization to enter into that with them at the current stipend rate, that nothing will change, it's just a matter of putting everything down on paper.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
roll call, please.
Mr. Walter?
Yes.
Ms. Alves? Yes. Mrs. Nato?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Boucher?
Yes. Discussion by council, vote or other actions on resignations from town board and commissions. Redevelopment Commission, Mr. Rapco, and Parks and Recreation, Mr. Barry.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion. First of all, we can personally thank Mr. Rathko for his service on that. We haven't lost him. He's in service to the town on the budget committee. Thank you, Mike. We really appreciate it. And, Mr. President, if I may make a motion for that the town clerk acknowledge Mr. Rathko's contribution in a, what do we call that? A nice paper that says thank you. Thank you, letter. Yes, that's what we call it. Can we do that? That's a motion.
Second. Chair seconds. All in favor, say aye. Okay, guys have it.
I think for all the meetings at Mr. Rapco, we might issue a certificacy of occupancy. That's why I'm getting confused with the whole thing.
Okay, the second item is Parks and Recreation Commission, Mr. Barry, D. Barry. That was the one that, that was a gentleman who was just replaced by Anthony Sully, I believe.
Yes, that's correct.
Do it first, then
You accept, motion to accept his resignation?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Discussion by town council, what other action on the appointment of tree warden?
President,
Yes, Madam Clerk?
I spoke with Mr. Zuba's wife, and she is always the one who answers for him, and he does agree to be reappointed as the tree warden. Verbally.
That's different. His wife answers for him, whereas I answer to my wife.
He
It's a little different.
She answers all the time.
Stanley's been serving this town for decades, Stanley Tree, so, yeah. So we're looking for a motion to approve, accepting Mr. Stanley Tree Company. So moved.
Second.
Okay, second. Roll call vote, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Walter?
Yes.
Ms. Alves? Yes. Mrs. Nato?
Yes.
Mr. Zalinski?
Yes.
Mr. Boucher?
Yes. Discussion by council, vote or other action on various town administrative appointments.
Yes, I'd like to, with your approval, appoint the deputy town clerk so we can have someone who's backup for the current town clerk who's fading fast. Joanne,
You want to take them one at a time? Yeah.
the first one, her name is Joanne
Buddy.
Buddy, B-U-T-T-I-E.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to, I don't know why we have to approve this, but we approve your appointment of Joanne Buddy to deputy town clerk. That's a
Second.
motion.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Finance Director?
Number 2 is Finance Director, Mr. Jason Parmalee.
I just spoke to the solicitor today, and I just had some concerns with Mr. Connolly. With all due respect. Not so much with his role being finance director, but with his family or second
Former
employer,
performing the audit.
doing the auditing for the town. I'd like to get an opinion on that, or see, because personally, I just don't see how we could get a fair audit if someone that he worked for prior, or even has a family relation, can audit our books thoroughly. So I just kind of want to put down a record that I have concern with that, and I
Sure,
did contact the solicitor about that.
And also to let you know, in addition to any ruling or opinion that the solicitor can provide us, we are meeting, well, we have a conference call on Thursday, 2:30 with the Auditor General as well to work out any details and to see exactly, what the story is.
Basically, to cover the same concerns that you have, to make sure that the integrity is still there, which is not my concern at all, because my integrity is for you guys. EPA has their own procedures that they need to be accountable for, completely separate from me, as I'm now employed by the town. It's your decision whether you consider what they propose to go forward or not. I would recuse myself from anything in relation to those decisions. So based on if the information provided to you is that you feel the need to do something different, then that's, by all means, that's exactly what you should do. So it's not, I hope granted the concerns there, but I'm hoping you see that my attitude is that I work for the town and
Yeah,
this
it's
is not,
nothing
exactly,
with your position, because you're obviously, you'd be covered by ethics now, but I do have concerns because, we want to make sure we have transparency and there is no shadow of a doubt, but I would like to request that we, on a future agenda, we put discussing a new auditing firm or potential auditing firm.
Yeah.
going forward.
We're hoping to just provide you the information where you guys can make the decision, again, as you need to. As long as we provide you the right information, obviously you'll have the, whatever, the decision laid out in front of you, and be able to make the choice that you need to.
I can probably have that decision, but I still probably don't feel comfortable with having that auditing firm,
That's okay.
just because of,
I can understand what your opinion is.
so I would like to put that on a future agenda, that we maybe discuss that, and you can by all means bring whatever judgment you've received, but I would like to discuss with the other councils that maybe we try and terminate the contract that we are in with Connolly and go forward with searching for a new auditing firm. And unfortunately, you would have to be recused from that whole bidding process, so I would just request that we put that on the next agenda.
Mr. President, I confer with what Councilor Ralph said. If you recall, in the payment of bills, I asked Mr. if he was principal, and I was kind of going to lead into this question when we got to it, which you said you were not. And did we finally make the last installment payment on the services, which we did? And basically, Councilor Ralph, you were more articulate in expressing it than I would have been, but I do share your concerns about that's where I was going to go with from that previous question. Thank you very much for doing that.
Several questions, Town Administrator. Did we sign a multi-year contract for services, or is this at the end of the contract?
It's a 3-year with an annual renewable. So we're at the end of 1 year. One of potentially 3 renewable annually.
So if we opted out of this, we could,
That's the
without any,
legitimate opt-in out, yes.
It's written right into the engagement letter that you guys have the option for that.
I just wanted to make sure, because if we had signed, let's say, for example, a 3-year contract,
Oh, no, it has to have renewable
there
clause
could,
to it.
all right. Okay,
And
thank you.
the last person is the building official, Mr. James Cambio, and then the tax assessor, Mr. David Dolce.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to approve the administrator's appointment of building official Candia. That's a motion.
Second.
You don't need.
You don't need to?
appointment.
So just for town clerk, we have to approve?
That's it.
All right, okay, they're welcome aboard. Hey, question for you, Madam Administrator. Let's see, we got deputy town clerk, finance director, building official, tax assessor. You missed the Ps. Planning and public works. Have you made the decision yet? Or
Oh,
is it-
yeah, they're all, everyone else, with the exception of these new people, has been reappointed.
Oh, okay. So do we have to have that in the form on an agenda? So officially, you've reappointed these people?
Correct.
Okay. Does it require that it be on an agenda for our notification? Okay.
I mean, I could give you a list of every name if you'd like, but, yeah, sure. I can do
All
that.
right, thanks.
And the last item, discussion with council vote on other action by collective bargaining agreements for an STA and an SAASP. I'd like to table that this time.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Alden?
Yes.
Al? Yes. Mrs. Nato?
Yes.
Mr. Zalinski?
Yes.
Mr. Chang?
Yes. Oh, sorry. Is it Tuesday? Sorry. Yeah, the auditor, you were the person who showed up.
So we're going to table that?
I'll have to table that till the next, questions, the next meeting.
I'll let them know.
So there's a motion to the table on the order that.
There's a motion on the table here.
Table the audit.
Table the order.
Second.
Clerk, roll call.
Mr. Alden?
Yes.
Mrs. Al? Yes. Mrs. Nato?
Yes.
Mr. Zalinski?
Yes.
Mr. Chang?
Yes. At this point, we have a motion to adjourn.
I second it.
Second by Councilman Walter. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
There was a lot to work on.